What's up, Mech fans, and welcome back to the channel. So a few months ago, I talked about the original Mobile Suit Gundam series after watching it for the first time in 2025. Today, we're going back to it, and we're going to be doing a tier list ranking. Now, I've got a couple of tier lists planned for this series. I was originally going to do just a straight up character tier list, but there's a lot of characters in there that I don't really care to talk about all that much. So instead, I've split it into two, and today we're going to be doing the White Base Crew tier list, ranking all of the characters that are members of the White Base Crew. But before we dive into it, please do leave a like on this video and subscribe if you're a fan of Mecha anime content and want to see plenty more videos like this in the future. Also, head on down to the comments section below. Let me know your favourite characters from the White Base Crew in Mobile Suit Gundam. And without further ado, let's get into the tier list. If you've seen these tier list videos before, you guys will know the drill. As per usual, we've got S, A, B, C, and D tier. Starting off though, we have Amuro Ray, starting with the lead character within this series and arguably the lead character of Universal Century as a whole. Straight away, he's going right to the top of S tier. Amuro Ray is, of course, the leading protagonist of Gundam, the benchmark really for main characters within the series, and kind of everyone since then has been templated around him. In fact, not even just within Gundam, within Mecha series in general, you look at Evangelion and everyone talks about how, about Shinji as a character, but if you look at the way that that character acts, his role in the series and such, is essentially based off Amuro in many ways. Like, Amuro is the template for mecha protagonists from Gundam onwards. Obviously, there's some that are diverted from it and such, but generally, there's a lot of inspiration to be drawn there. As a character, though, he is absolutely phenomenal because at the end of the day, he is just a kid. He's thrown into an unrealistic scenario in terms of what's expected of him, and the way that he reacts, a lot of people say is like annoying, spoil, all this kind of stuff, but let's face it, someone that young who's thrown all this responsibility would react in ways that he does react in this series. For him to desert completely makes sense where all this responsibility is being thrown onto him, but at the same time, people are saying that he's not doing a good enough job. And he's such a complex character that's really molded and goes through an incredible arc through Mobile Suit Gundam and changes so much over the course of that series. And he's just a great representation of what this franchise stands for and the complexity behind a lot of its characterization. So without a doubt, Amuro Ray goes right at the top of S tier. And then moving on, we've actually got another one of the main characters, and that is Bright Noah, who again, I'm putting into S tier, but behind Amuro Ray. Now, much like Amuro, he's just very interesting in the way that he is thrown into a situation that's way above what he should be doing. I believe that in this series, Bright, even though he doesn't look like it, is 19 years old. So he's younger than me. Like, he's 5 years younger than me, which is wild for me to think about. And the fact that he's put in this position where, he's essentially leading these battles. He is leading this whole crew of people, and he's just simply not qualified for it. And it's just an example of how wars work. They kind of get started, and then all these people are thrown into positions that they really shouldn't be in just out of the necessity of the situation. He's unlikable to a degree, but you completely understand where he's coming from because he's one of the only actually qualified military people on the ship, and he has to deal with a lot of these people that simply aren't soldiers and were never intending to be soldiers. So he's got to deal with all of that. But then he's also just taking on so much responsibility, and we get to a point where he does become ill just because of stress and just because of so much going on. And it's just such a realistic scenario that they put him in. His interactions with characters, his reactions to things, completely reasonable. But of course, from an audience perspective, you've seen him be, a little bit of a dick towards people. But at the end of the day, because he's put in this situation, you completely understand kind of some of the responses that he has to things and the way that he sometimes comes across. So again, Bright Noah is just a fantastic character that is just so well molded by this world and the scenarios that he's put in that, again, he's just another example of the great characterization within Mobile Suit Gundam. Next up there, we've got Fraubo, and she's one of those characters that on the surface doesn't seem super important because she's not involved in the action, she's not involved in more of the military stuff within the series, but she's aboard the White Base as almost the beating heart of it. Sure, she's not up front on the bridge, occasionally she is, but for the most part she's not. She's not going out on the front lines in battles and such, but she is, taking command of everyone that's on the ship really, and maintaining a sense of peace, looking after all these civilians that are there initially, and then of course looking after the kids and things like that. So she's really like a moral compass for the entire crew, and I think she's really heavily underappreciated in that regard in this series, because sometimes she can come across as nagging and kind of annoyed at Amuro, and even though like she's not the person that's going out and doing all this fighting, but there's so much going on with this character and there's so much that she is doing behind the scenes that more often than not just goes completely unappreciated by the characters but also by the audience as well. So for Albo, while she's not my favorite character in the series, she is definitely a really solid B. Could even potentially shift to A depending on how I'm feeling when we get to the end of this tier list. Moving on though, we've got Harrow. Now it's so difficult to place this because it's such an icon within Gundam. It is like the consistent thing within like this entire franchise, whether it is in Universal Century or whether it's in any of the other countless alternate universes that we've got. It is essentially that like one thing that stays consistent across all of Gundam, much like, a Chocobo or a Moogle within Final Fantasy. They, of course, keep the same title name, but all the games are different, set in different universes. But the consistent thing there is, some of the mobs and such that we've got on it. So that is kind of what Harrow works as for Gundam. And of course, it's very iconic and paved the way for it to be consistent across like the entire franchise. So as a character, it's really a nothing kind of thing, but because of its significance, it's kind of there and it's a lot of fun. I am going to sit it right into B. Next, we've got Hayato Kobayashi, the pilot of the gun tank, and sometimes the gun cannon and sometimes other things. He does quite a lot in this series, and this is one of those characters that a lot of people don't seem to like, especially within the original series, but I think he's one of the more harmless ones, to be honest. Like, he is really solid as a character, in my opinion. Of course, he gets like a good amount of screen time in regards to the white base crew, and he's one of the major players within that. But also, like, I don't get why people don't like him, because he doesn't ever do anything that is hateable in any way. Sure, he maybe goes against Amuro on occasion and gets frustrated with the things that Amuro does, but ultimately he is like an the most like middling character, and I say that in a good way, where he's just solid and he just doesn't do anything that's like takes you in one direction of really loving him and also doesn't take you in a direction of really hating him. So he is very much a right in the middle kind of character for me, and I quite like him, so I'm going to sit him in B. We're going to put him above Haru because there's more characterization there, but I still think that Frobo is definitely a much better character than him. Moving on though, we've got Job John. Now, this is a character that in this series really doesn't do that much, but the whole fandom seems to love him for that very reason, and also what he then goes on to do, because he's actually the person who created the Gundam F90, of course the precursor to the Gundam F91. So within Universal Century and longer term, he is actually very, very important within the universe. Probably more important than, a lot of these characters on here where his creation actually has significance within the history of Universal Century. But in terms of this series in particular, he's just fine. He's just kind of there, and he does some bits, like he stands out more than some of the white base crew. But at the end of the day, like, he never gets that big forefront moment where he doesn't really pilot the mobile suits. He doesn't have like any significant role on the bridge. Of course, he's important to the generally what goes on within White Base, but in terms of what we see in terms of the story of this series, doesn't really do a whole lot. Again, like, I don't dislike him at all, and you gotta respect what comes afterwards to a degree, but in terms of this series specifically, he's fine, but also he's not super standout. Next up though, we've got Kai Shiden, one of those characters that is so damn hateable for almost half of this series, and then you start to peel back the layers a little. You give him something that humanizes him a little bit better, where he gets to show some emotion and caring for things and people, and from there, he starts to become a bit more likable. He is definitely one of those characters that grows over time in terms of just straight up being someone that's very hateable to start with, to then a little bit more likable and redeemable towards the end of the series. So I like him. I think he's very solid. I'm actually going to go above Hayato simply because he has a bit more time dedicated to him and growing him. Like, he has his own little mini arc in here that I don't think Hayato really has. I think I like him just a little bit more. I also like the gun cannon a bit more than the gun tank as well as a mobile suit. Of course, we're not talking about mobile suits here, but yeah. Kai, I think it's just a little bit stronger than Hayato. Next up though, we've got the three very young kids that stay aboard the Y-Base crew in Katz, Let's, and Kika. Now I'm going to put them in B. I think I'm actually going to put them above Hayato because I just think they've got a bit more significance. Now again, they don't have like substantial character arcs, but they do have moments dedicated to them. And they are actually quite fun, and they're just a nice addition to the White Base crew. Their relationship with Robo, I think, is really sweet throughout the series, and also just their relationship and interactions with all the characters that we have. I just think they add a lot more in terms of different interactions where not everything is super serious. You can have that element of fun and levity, but you do also do things with the characters that do add a little bit of levity. The fact that they, essentially have lost their parents, and you do dig at that. You do dig at their, found family feeling that they've got with some of these characters. I think it's really fascinating. Next up, we got Marker Clan, one of the heads of the bridge crew. Like, he's up on top and things like that. Not a standout character by any means, but he has a presence throughout most of the series simply because there's a lot of scenes that take place within this bridge. But he's not really given any significant character development. So we're going to sit him in C. I'm going to put him at the bottom, and we're actually going to talk about another character, which is Oscar Dublin, and he's the partner of this character in terms of they're both on the bridge. There's nothing really done with them in the series. They're just kind of there. So we're going to put them both. They're kind of interchangeable in terms of C tier. Next up, though, we have Mirai Yashima, one of the major characters within this series. And right off the bat, I'm putting her in A tier because she is a major player in this series. I do think they do some really good stuff with her, especially when we go to side 6 and you get to kind of learn about her past a little bit more, her relationships, the things that she left behind in order to join this fight. I think is really fascinating, but I also really like where she's put in charge and she basically just breaks down on the bridge of the white base because she is not in that position to be able to do that. And I think also that shows the strength of character of Bright in the fact that he manages to do that when he's really not qualified for it. So that is one of those moments that could make the character like almost hateable to a degree where you think like just get on with it and all this kind of stuff. But thinking realistically, someone put in that position where they just are not qualified, they don't want that responsibility, and it's a totally understandable reaction. And again, it just speaks to the quality of characterizing within this series. So I really like that they do that. And again, Mirai is a really, really good character. Next up, we've got Omo Fang. Now, the only significant thing this character does in this series is blow up a door on the white base that then ends up killing their Xeon captive that they got when they were fighting Rambaral. So I'm going to put him in D tier, unfortunately. And he is going to be the one D tier character here because he has one significant standout moment that's almost memeable, and that's essentially this character's legacy, which is not the greatest legacy to have, but it's not the worst either. So we're going to see him in D tier, but I don't hate him to any degree. There's just nothing to talk about with him aside from one single scene, which doesn't really have much significance anyway. Next up, though, we've got Paulo Casillas, of course, the original captain of the Y base. He's largely out of action. One of the things I do like about him, though, is that he's one of those higher-ups within the Federation military that just seems like a genuinely good guy, because you see so many people in this series that are higher-ups within the Federation that just have such a disregard for people and human life and things like that. But Paolo's just one of those characters that's not like that. He just seems like a genuinely good person in the military that is there for the reasons of wanting to do good and is not going to take advantage of people or situations. Respect to him for that. He's not a standout character, so we are going to put him in C, but we are going to put him at the top because I'd probably say he plays a bit more of a role than Job John and has a bit more significance, but he also doesn't really get a chance to do a lot in this series because he's largely bedridden. Moving on though, we've got Ryu Jose, the MVP of Mobile Suit Gundam, in my opinion. I love him. Like, he's really one of those characters that I feel like it's so hard to dislike him or hate him to any degree, because he's just that character that almost everyone would like and never really has a bad bone in his body. There are things in this series, of course, where he, basically punches Amuro, where that could potentially make him hateable, but he's doing it all in the name of trying to get him in a good position. And he truly cares about everyone there, to the point that, of course, he does make that sacrifice play. And I just love the character for that. Like, his death is so impactful in this series, and the reaction from everyone afterwards and how much he meant to everyone. He's just such a great character, and out of everyone here, he's definitely the guy that I would most want to sit down and just chat with and have fun with, because he's a character that, yeah, like, he can be a fun character. He can, at times he can be stern and take things seriously and such, but at the end of the day, like, he is one of those people that you could sit down and talk to about your problems, and he would truly sit there and listen and care about everything that you're saying. It's so difficult to dislike this character. He is straight up going to the top of A tier. He's not quite an S tier character. Maybe if you didn't die in the series or died like at the end of the series, maybe he would make that S tier. But again, he's really fantastic. So I'm putting him at the top of A very comfortably. Moving on to the last few now though, starting off with Sailor Mass, the female lead really of this series, especially of the white base crew. Sailor's a great character that's so underutilized in Future UC that it's almost criminal, because there's so much potential that was there with this character, and they definitely like capitalized on it in this series, but there was so much they could have done afterwards that they never really did, for reasons such as the voice actress never being available and Tomino not wanting to replace the voice actress, which I still think is kind of stupid, but you know, it is what it is. Like, I'm not the director. I wasn't in a position to make those decisions. In fact, I wasn't even alive when this series was made, so I couldn't do anything about it. Looking at her in this series, she's fantastic and definitely deserving of that female lead role, because she's a strong character, she's fierce, she's just everything you want from like a traditionally strong female character. Like, in terms of, you know, just well written, someone that is willing to take charge and just, they just do everything right. Like, she's just a prime example of how you do a well written, strong, independent female character. And for that reason, I'm putting her in A. I'm going to put her above Ryu, though. I know that I said like he comfortably goes to the top of A, but we're changing things up a little bit, because Sailor has like significant characterization and really significant art throughout this series, to the point that, like I said, she's basically the female lead because she has a very significant storyline here. So I think she's great. I think the relationship and kind of back and forth that she's having with Shah, and kind of revisiting that old past of hers, but also what she's signed up for now, and trying to juggle both of those in her head to, you know, does she go with her brother? Does she, you know, stay away from her brother because he is, you know, one of the aces of Xeon, who are the enemies here, is that kind of stuff. So I think she's very well written in this series, and it's, again, criminal that she's heavily underutilized following this series. Next up, we've got Sleggar Law, who is basically one of those like sleazy dirtbag type characters that's also very, very likable and very fun to watch. So for that reason, I am going to sit him in B. Initially, I was actually going to put him over Frolbo, but I'm actually going to put him behind her. I'm really starting to grow on this character a lot more as I think more about her and think more about her role in the series. But yeah, Sleggar is just a very likable presence. Like, he's one of those guys that, sure, he's not the nicest person to everyone ever, but he's just that cool, suave guy that kind of walks in, shows up, and he's just cool to have around. And then last, but not quite least, we've got Tamura, who is the chef of the white base. And he doesn't really do anything more than that. But he's also very important, because let's face it, if he wasn't there, no one gets to eat. So he does play a role in terms of that. I think that he has some more significant moments than these two characters, so I'm actually going to put him in C, right in the middle of C tier. There we have it though, that was my tier list ranking every single white base crew member from Mobile Suit Gundam. Before I get out here, please do leave a like on this video and subscribe if you are a fan of mecha anime content and want to see plenty more videos like this in the future. And like I said earlier, head on down to the comment section below. Let me know your favorite member of the white base crew, or if you want to let me know your favorite member of the Federation, also feel free to do that as well. And stay tuned, because I will have another character tier list for Mobile Suit Gundam talking about the Xeon characters, so stay tuned for that. Thank you once again for tuning into Mecha Chat today, and I'll see you guys next time.